Welcome to part 6 of our DIY deck build. On part 5 we went from a waterproof frame to a beautiful composite platform, and now we're rolling onto the railing so we don't fall off this thing. Can we get the details right without messing up more than 8 times? This is the lengths we're going through to... Holy f***, I broke that off. Okay, let's find out. I thought I accommodated the bottom plate, but I guess not. Something is not quite right there. We got a sunbather on the deck already. Okay, you're not gonna get We just finished all of the decking and fascia on our elevated walkout deck. It's missing one thing, however, and that is safety railing. We definitely do not want to be falling off this, as we're probably almost 12 feet in the air. So this video is going to be all about installing our 42-inch high black aluminum textured railing. It's a surface mounted system, and we're going to walk through the install from start to finish.
First, a quick overview of the different components we're going to be using. So here's a closer look at the railing. This is referred to as a rail panel. You can see that this has a square profile, which we liked because it's a little bit more modern. Then we have the classic top rail. This is going to go on top of the rail panel on the top portion of the deck. And then we're actually going to cap this with a deck board so that we have like a flat surface, but you could just leave this without the deck board. In order to add the deck board, we have to use a deck board adapter, which is going to go on top of this. And then for the stairs, we're doing something a little bit different. For the top rail, by code, you have to have something that's pretty ergonomic for someone to be able to grip safely as they go down the stairs. This is the Cambridge top rail. So you can see it has more of a curved profile and is less of a square profile.
The last thing to mention, and actually the first thing we're going to be working with, are the posts. We have 45-inch posts for the main deck surface for our 42-inch tall railing. Then there's also 60-inch posts for the stair railing. Need to be a little bit taller to accommodate that sloped railing. These things are extruded aluminum, and they are really solid and beefy. I'm impressed with how sturdy these things are just by lifting them up and holding them. We'll see how strong they are when we screw them and bolt them into the deck. But we first saw these at the International Building Show at Moisture Shield's booth. Really liked them, reached out to them, and we're partnering with them on this project. So really excited to get it all installed and see how everything turns out. Before we do anything with these railings, I'm putting a mark 2 7/8 inch down from the top surface. This seemingly random dimension is what you need to cut off on all these posts in order to run the deck board over top the post. There's kind of two options. You can let the post stick up and then run the deck boards up to it, but we did not like the look of that. We want the deck board to run all the way across the top, no breaks, mitered at the corners, and it conveniently tells you in the instructions for the deck board adapter that you need to cut 2 7/8 inches off of it. And I also kind of mocked everything up just to confirm that before I cut these all, and my math also came out to 2 7/8. So I'm pretty confident that's what we need to cut off. I think can use my just normal 60-tooth blade in my miter saw, and that's what it says in the instructions anyway. We're gonna try it on the first one. It's aluminum, so I think a carbide blade will do it, but we will certainly find out. Slow and steady. Nice clean cut, easy, just loud. Clean up crew on aisle 9. We're just about to get started working, and then we found that we have an extra set of hands today helping out. Little Cricket decided to latch onto Elena.
Yep, he's coming to help.
The next step is to get started with the surface mounting, but before we get to actually drilling stuff, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the layout and the planning and material estimating, because neither of us have ever installed a railing system or built a deck before, so it took a little bit of thought to understand what the heck we were getting ourselves into and doing all the material estimates. How many posts we need, how many rail panels. What really helped was using Chief Architect, the same software we designed the whole house in, and we built the deck in that. That allowed us to really visualize what it was going to look like, how many posts we need, see a plan view of the drawing so we could see any little intricacies, how we were going to handle the railing where it curves around for the stairs. And that really helped a lot with figuring out the right material estimates, even down to the number of deck boards we needed, like actually mapping out with the gaps and everything, how many boards we needed to cover this whole deck. Like I mentioned, this is a surface mounted railing, and we had to accommodate for that when it came time to framing. If you remember in our framing video, we put blocking around the perimeter that gives us a spot to screw these end deck boards to, but it also gives us a spot to fasten our railing down to. And just coincidentally, these things come with a little base plate that gives you the exact footprint of what that railing looks like with the 4 bolt holes already spaced out. So this was a really handy tool when I was framing to understand where that blocking needed to be. And we actually doubled up the thickness of the blocking where the railings were gonna go. So I'm using the same little piece of steel as sort of a hole guide template. When I'm really fine tuning where these things have to be positioned, this gives me the perfect 4-hole pattern for marking it out on the deck, and I'll probably drill through this thing as well. One of the biggest questions I had when figuring this out is where exactly on the deck do you put this? Can you put it all the way out here? Does it have to be all the way in here and you sacrifice all this deck area? And so this is what I came down to. There's kind of 2 options. You can have these holes lag screwed into the rim joist if you really center that up on the rim joist, and then these in our picture frame blocking, because this is a piece of flat blocking here, these will be through bolts, and that is what I'm going to land on. The other option was to come all the way back here and do all 4 through bolts, which might be a little stronger. The through bolts are definitely stronger than lagging, but if you have 2 out of 4 that are through, I feel like it's a little bit nicer to have more of your deck space that's actually, you know, available for use rather than putting your railing super far in. So these 2 holes are going to center on our rim joist, which we have about 1.5 inch overhang here for our picture frame board, accommodating for that width, and then the thickness of our rim joist, centering this hole up on our 1.5 inch thick rim. That is roughly where they're gonna sit. So I took much more careful measurements on the ones I already have marked, but that's about what it's gonna be, and then I'll through bolt these 2 guys here. First, I went around and marked out where all the corners are gonna be, again, thinking about my overhangs, making sure that's getting into solid framing. And the sections where there's more than 2 posts in a row, like if I have a middle post, I'm gonna mark that after we get these posts installed, just so I can pull a string line between the posts and get this nice and centered. I probably could do it ahead of time, but I think that'll be a little bit easier.
Wow, it produces so much of that stuff.
Okay. And there she is. These 2 are through holes through my blocking, so you can see through them, while these are blind holes for the lag bolts. That is about as good as you can hand drill a hole pattern. I'll take that for the first try. Let's see how it fits. Now, if you remember, this is a waterproof deck, and I literally just drilled through the waterproofing membrane on my flat blocking here. So I'm going to do my best to attempt to seal these bolts and these fasteners as well as I can. I'm using the same thing that I used to seal between the laps of the EPDM rubber, Zip Liquid Flash. It is rated for sealing against EPDM, and honestly, I think if we just fill up the annular space around the bolt inside of its hole, it will not really, cause any significant source of leakage that's gonna be, a major problem, especially because I'm gonna put the same sealant under the washer heads and under the bolt heads, so no water could get down from the top, and there's still a decorative trim that goes around this, which we could also seal around with Lexal to make sure that any water that, runs down the railing will just drip onto the deck board and into the waterproofing system rather than try to wick up underneath this. But we'll go ahead and give a couple squirts in each hole and just see what happens. I mean, I'm not quite certain how much to put in. This is gonna be a little bit of a trial and error, I think. See how much gets squeezed out of it. But yeah, as long as we can kind of just mush it around with the threads, I think we'll be pretty good. The through bolts are gonna be harder because it's gonna wanna just push all the sealant out the bottom. But we'll do our best here. I might add it to the through bolt kind of as it's going in and sort of thread it in. Let's get our railing set. All goes well, this should line up perfectly. There's always gonna be a little bit of modification that's gotta happen, so I'm gonna plumb it up. How are we looking this way? Pretty good. They're literally having a war down there or something.
Like why? I don't understand why they're like shooting so many rounds.
They're doing target practice. So it ain't much. It's probably a 16th on one side that's gonna come up. I'll get these lags started.
Is there a cover plate that goes over top of it?
Yep. Just add a little bit of a barrier. Just want to get these started.
What goes on between the house and this?
Nothing.
Really?
Yep. A 4-inch sphere can't fit through it, which is the size of a kid's head. And you're good. Let's see, look where we're at. 3 3/4, which is the 3 3/4 is the width of, I checked this. 3 3/4 is the width of the baluster spacing as well. The main reason we're not up against the house is because of this flashing. I didn't want to put a bolt through the flashing, right? I wanted that to stay intact. So we're right, like if you look down, the edge of this plate is right at the edge of the flashing. Before I get this down tight, I'll throw some liquid flash in under these. I don't think I mentioned it before, these are 5-inch lags, so we got about an inch down through the composite decking, and then probably another half or so inch soaked up between the thickness of this plate, the washer. So we're getting, I would say, around 3.5, 3 3/4 inches of engagement with that rim joist, and hopefully that's enough. We'll see how tight it is when it's all fully assembled. First post we put in seemed pretty darn sturdy by itself, and I think once you link them together with the railing, it'll probably help at least a little bit, so that's what we're gonna do. This thing's really out. Could it be that far out? I guess so, because this thing really, these deck boards lean down quite a bit. We got a sunbather on the deck already, AKA a bored carpenter's apprentice. So we got the corner post in, and the bored carpenter's apprentice was holding the string, but she let it go, and we string line between the two. There's a 1-inch offset from the edge of this plate to where the post starts. So I made a mark at 1 inch, made sure that mark was right below the string line, and it is in the correct position this way anyway, to be in a perfectly straight line between the two posts. Then I also measured between them and found the center mark here. So that is perfectly centered between the two posts and also in a perfect straight line. What we need to double check though is that we are centered that's a new word. Centered over top of that rim joist here with our hole. And so actually before I put the fascia boards on, I knew I was gonna need to know these measurements for these midspan posts. And this one actually is 1 7/8 inches. Typically it was about 1.5 inch overhang. This was a little bit larger. So I'm going to make sure that I accommodate for that. It might mean shifting this in just ever so slightly, 1/8 or 2, which would bring it out of line, but it'll make sure that the lags are totally centered within that framing, which is important for good structural integrity. So I'll take that 1 7/8 inches, add 3/4, which is half the thickness of my rim joist, and at that point, that should be the center line of the bolts going this way from the edge of this deck board. Post number 3, dropping in. And the last one, I forgot to do the liquid flash underneath these washers, so I'm gonna make sure I do it on this one. Got the first 3 posts up, and I think before we do any other posts, we're gonna go ahead and do the rail panels on this just so we can get our feet wet and make sure that all of our dimensions are right. Having never done the system before, it's kind of a learning curve, and we just wanna make sure that our posts are the right height and everything's gonna work out before we do all the posts and then can't go back. So I didn't seal underneath these washers. I'm gonna hit them with a little bit of Lexel on top now just for some extra safety, because the cap that goes over this has a split in it and is definitely not watertight. This is the base cap. It's a 2-part piece, cast aluminum, and it joins together with one of these little automotive style clips so that in the future, if you ever need to, you can easily pry them apart. Slides right over top, nice clean look. Every post comes with this handy little paper template, which I did have to add 6 inches to the middle of for the 42-inch tall rail versus a 36. It sits on top of the base trim, and the black holes indicate where you drill for the level railing. White holes are for the angle railing. That establishes height, and then this guy is a nice little piece of plastic they give you in order to perfectly center those holes on the post itself, regardless of which way you hold it. Okay, don't use an impact. So the idea is to mock this up and get the spacing between the baluster and each newel post the same on either side, so it's nice and symmetrical, and leave a little mark where it intersects the railing. So I measured these about 2.5 inches on both sides, and then they tell you to take a 1/4 inch off for the thickness of this bracket right here, because this railing sits on top of this little ledge. So you got to take a 1/4 inch off both sides, top and bottom, and boom, we should have our railing panel. The moment of truth. The bottom brackets are like a little cup, so you gotta sit it down in the cups, then get the tops on. Look at that. She fits. Doesn't even put any stress on the post or anything. Got a little bit of clearance yet. Love it. Got a little bit of a problem here. This is the deck board railing adapter, and it fits great. Everything's looking nice, except a deck board's not going to run over the surface of that. That's about 3/8 of an inch too tall. The instructions for this railing adapter say you just need to cut 2 7/8 off a 45 or 39-inch post, which is what I did. I have a 45-inch post, and you should achieve a 42 1/8 top dimension from the mounting surface. However, this concerned me a little bit as I was
putting things together, but I wasn't gonna be sure until I actually saw it. This is 42.5 inches with that 2 7/8 removed.
In other words, it's 3/8 inch taller than it should be, and the deck railing will not go over it the way it is. So I think they might have forgotten about that bottom plate, maybe. That's about a little over a 1/4 inch thick. When I mocked things up, it seemed to work out. Something in my math must have been wrong too. I thought I accommodated the bottom plate, but I guess not. So I'm gonna have to trim these in place. I think I'm going to take this rail panel off because it's just sitting in place right now. Then use my jigsaw perhaps. I don't really want to use the circular saw up here because it flings so much aluminum dust everywhere. So I think I'm gonna try to use the jigsaw and see what happens, but it's a little bit of a pain, and luckily we've only done 3 out of like 10 so far, so I can accommodate on the next ones and cut them 3/7 inch shorter than these guys. My jigsaw blade didn't have a long enough metal blade, so Sawzall it is. Wish I really could have done this with the miter saw, but it is what it is. So we'll have to do 3 at least. That's the bright side. Got a rag in here to keep shavings from falling down in. So much harder to do this well. Sawzalls are so sloppy. And I guess I could use a circular saw. That turned out fine.
Yeah, but the whole deck is now confetti.
Grab the blower. This is the lengths we're going through to keep the aluminum dust off the deck.
Don't hit the house.
Trying not to.
What?
This railing's definitely getting the vibration test. This is soaking up all of my vibrations. I'm gonna try going this way. That looks much better. This is how I feel it's supposed to look, and we are gonna be able to run a deck board all the way across there. It's all nice and flush. So I think we've got our process down. I don't think we need to walk through the rest of that. I think it calls for a good old-fashioned music montage. Gosh, who does not love a good montage? We now have deck railing, easy as that. I haven't cut the deck board adapters for all of them yet. I'll do that tomorrow. And I'm also gonna take some zip tape and just seal off the tops of these guys because we can't use the cone caps that came with them that are supposed to shed water. The deck board will be floating over top of this. So just to discourage any water that shouldn't be in there, I'm gonna go ahead and cap these with some zip tape before I run the deck board over top. I also need to go around and put these little guys in. They're little U-shaped pedestals that are supposed to go under the midspan of each railing section to help with deflection in the middle. I wasn't really sure if I was gonna need them or not, but on these long 8-foot sections, if you go ahead and lean on this, even with just like your upper body weight, it definitely sags a little bit in the middle, and it's just because it's a long span. So it's easy enough to put these in. I actually have not locked in the top railing yet, so these all can pull up a little bit. They just pivot up underneath here and slide down to where you need them. You are able to actually put a screw in the deck and put this cap over top, but I'm actually gonna go ahead and just keep it as it is and just let gravity hold this in place. It can't really go that far once it's in, and I don't really want to put an extra hole in the deck if I don't have to. So that will just be kind of a little pedestal to prevent any extra deflection if someone's leaning right on the top of the rail, but if needed, I can slide it around. Also, I don't know if you noticed the shirt during the montage, TDC, the slogan is, "You can't rush quality." And the logo on the back is Turtle Deck Construction. Before we look at that too closely, I want to talk about last video doing the deck boards. Elaine and I were making fun of each other about how slow we are at building this deck, because it's been like, we've been on this project for like 7 weeks on and off amidst a bunch of other things, but it's taking like, you know, most of the summer to build this thing. And I'm like, if we had a deck building company, it would be called Turtle Deck Construction. I've coined the term Turtle Deck Construction because that would be the name of our company if we were going to be deck builders for a living. And the motto is the slowest deck you'll ever get, but the most quality too. The most attention to detail. It was my birthday just a couple days ago.
Okay.
Feels like clothes.
I'm not even gonna tell you. You just have to open it.
Feels like clothes.
Okay, well, do you have a guess?
Lightweight.
Well, you can't touch it and then guess.
It's definitely a shirt.
Well, do you have any guesses now?
MDA shirt. New Mason X Naker shirt. True work.
Okay.
True work, MDA. Holy fella.
Don't look at the back yet.
What do you mean? You said I'm opening it. You can't rush quality. Oh my God. You actually got this. You actually got a shirt made for this. That is hysterical. That is a great logo.
Elena surprised me with this t-shirt, which she had a friend cut this out on a Cricut and she heat pressed it onto this t-shirt she bought on Amazon. And I just thought it was really funny. It was really a great little birthday moment. Probably one of the better gifts I've ever received. But we decided this was funny enough. We made some reels on it on Instagram. This is what I'm thinking.
Ooh, I love it. How long do you think it'll take with just the two of us?
I'm thinking 3-4 weeks tops.
It's been 8 weeks.
You can't rush quality.
We're moving at a turtle pace.
Funny you say that, sweetie, because I just filed papers for our new DIY deck construction company. Turtle Deck Construction. Just you and me building decks where you can't rush quality and it's the slowest deck you'll ever get.
Oh my gosh, Alex.
If you're interested, we do have a pre-order on our website. We're just going through a local t-shirt supplier, so we're doing pre-orders, and whoever decides to order it, we're just gonna get an order made from the local supplier. But we just thought it was kind of funny. You know, I'll be wearing this throughout future videos. So if you think this little inside joke is as funny as I do, feel free to hit the link to pre-order above. Before capping this off with the deck board, I would like to get all the rest of the railing finished, which clearly the stairs are not finished yet. So I'm going to fast forward past getting all these stair treads on so we can finish all the railing caps in one piece. These stair treads were a pretty intense project by themselves, so that will be the deck series finale. Thank you to everyone who hit subscribe a couple episodes ago when I mentioned that 85% of our views were from non-subscribers. Believe it or not, the percentage actually went down to 81%. So if you're still not 81%, here's an incredibly cute photo of an AI squirrel asking you politely. And by the magic of film, stair treads are done, minus the plugs in these top treads here. We are ready for railing. This is going to be a little bit of a project. We have 6 posts we have to put here on the stairs and 2 posts yet at the top. So a total of 8 more posts yet to go up. Then we got to cut the angled railing, get it all in place and fastened in. Obviously we're using the same 2.5-inch powder coated aluminum railing that we use on the top of the deck. It's Moisture Shield's compass railing. These though are a little bit taller for the stair treads because they have to sit down on a tread and still hit that 36-inch railing height. So these are actually 60-inch posts while the rest of ours are 45s, I believe. And we've been trimming about 3 inches off them to 42 inches. This will obviously have to be trimmed too, but it's going to be more than 45 inches, I have a feeling. So we got the long ones. We're going to mock them up, see where they need to get cut. That way we can cut them all equally while they're on the ground, where it's a lot easier. So here's me playing around with some scraps of our other rail panel cutoffs and some clamps just to see where everything's going to lay out. I have these posts roughly situated, like where they're going to be side to side on the step. The plan is to use 2 lag screws on the outsides to go down into the stringer, and then on the inside I have double blocking that I put in between those stair stringers that I'm going to do through bolts on the 2 insides. They should land in that blocking. Couple notes on this railing setup when it comes to code. I'm probably not going to be 100% code compliant by the end of this video. There's going to be a couple additions we need to make. First of all, These panels that I got are 42-inch high rail panels to match the 42-inch high guards up on the top of the deck. So the code height for railing is between 34 to 38 inches from the nosing to the top height of the deck rail. And these panels are actually going to be quite a bit taller than that, about 6 inches taller, just because at the top of these stairs, it's going to feel like you're still on the top of the deck. And I did not want to have a really low railing there where, you know, you could potentially fall over the edge of the stairs if you come around the corner too hot or something. So that is one thing. The railing height when it's finished is actually going to be high. Second, there's going to be 2 newel posts along the run here to stabilize the railing. I can't just do one giant railing panel all the way up. It's way too long. So the railing is not supposed to be broken up by newel posts when it's a straight run of stairs. So that's the second thing. Even if these were at 36-inch high, if I had the newel posts breaking up the runs, the handrail is supposed to be continuous, so that would not be code compliant. And the third thing is I have this newel post here on the third to last step so that I can round off the edge of the stairs. That's our preference, that we wanted to be able to walk off the stairs to the side and walk on. Code is that the rail should come to a point above the last riser, basically. So that handrail should wrap all the way down and end at least right at the edge of this bottom step here. So the plan for this in the future, after we get the base railing newels and panels up, is on at least one side, by code, we should be putting a continuous handrail that attaches to the inside of these newel posts, and then we'll actually come down and curve over, maybe even take a right angle here at the bottom where it is at the 34 to 38 inch height, 36 inches typical, and that way it is continuous all the way up. You don't actually even have to grasp the tops of these tall rail panels, and you have your continuous railing on one side. So that will likely be a future addition beyond the scope of this video, but just something I wanted to note when you're thinking about your deck railing. There is quite a few rules around it. They're pretty simple rules, but you just got to know them in order to build a comfortable, code compliant, and safe set of stairs. There's a big beam across here, so I'm actually going to be putting lags in all 4 of these holes for this newel post here. I'm just going to get a post temporarily fastened on this right now with some regular deck screws. That way at this top newel post I can see clearly whether or not I'm going to need to actually use a long or a regular length post to match the existing guard railing here. I'm not sure how that angled stair railing is going to land up at the top here and how that's going to mesh up with the existing railing yet. So I'm not going to anchor anything in permanently yet. All right. With that just tacked in place, now I can pull a string line to the bottom and get my middle guys straight. Then I'll come back, do the actual holes, and put the lag screws in this for good. That's our inaugural load of laundry, right? All right, don't mind George, but we got the top and the bottom anchored temporarily with some screws, and I have a string now that I can use to make sure that those middle 2 guys are nice and plumb. Learned this lesson the hard way on this railing. Didn't notice this at first, but I used the framing as my guide, and when you look down this railing, you can see it is not straight. Something is not quite right there. But luckily, we will be putting the deck rail board on top of this, and so that will look straight when it's all said and done. But I'm glad we're not leaving it just like this, because looking down it, you can clearly see something's not right. So we're not going to let that happen on these stairs, because we will not have a deck railing board on those to straighten things out. Tough to see, but the string line really helped. Those other 2 are now perfectly straight on. How's hole plugging going?
It's going good. Almost done. I've been hopping around a little bit, but it looks
all over the place.
Trying to make sure I got stuff done where Alex was going to be working.
I went ahead and unwrapped the first stair rail panel. This is an 8-foot section. I could have done 6, but I was not sure at the time I ordered it. So I'm just gonna have a few feet extra on every one of them. But that's okay, I was better safe than sorry, I guess. These are a little bit different in the level rail panels.
The only thing I can really tell is that there's just more of a cutout here, and so that lets the whole rail rack a little bit more to accommodate the angle on stairs.
So the instructions say to put a plank on the stairs at a given height to achieve the railing height you want, but I'm not sure exactly what that height is yet, so I'm just gonna clamp it in place here as is, and we can add a plank as needed. Yeah, this thing can really rack one way or another. Yeah, I think that'll be good. That feels much more comfortable than having a 36-inch rail here. Top height, yeah, I feel like you'd feel like you're gonna fall over something like that. So this is definitely nice. Probably wanna put like a 1-inch spacer underneath. That's what I'm gonna guess.
just enough to give it a little bit of reveal. Settled on actually a piece of scrap fascia, which is 5 inches thick, as our plank to sit the railing on. So it's only gonna have 5/8 of an inch gap between the nosings. So this morning I continued that board all the way up, and one thing I was kind of worried about and really wanted to check was on this top post here, where the railing landed, because I actually only bought 6 of these 60-inch posts, which I really need on these 6 that are gonna go down here. So I wanted to make sure that I could get away with a 45-inch post at the top of the stairs here, and thankfully I can. This is a cross-section of the top rail that we'll be using, so I wanted to see where that would intersect, and luckily we can get away with it. I can stick with the same 45-inch rail that I used for the rest of the deck railing. If this post was shifted back from the nosing of the stairs anymore, like if I had shifted this back maybe 3 or 4 inches, then it would not work. It only really works because it's quite close to the end of the stair nosing. We also were able to decide where we wanted the top post cap to be, so these are gonna all get cut at 48 inches, these long ones here, so they won't be nearly this tall when it's all said and done. We'll cut that off on the bench. These are the 2 brackets for the stairs. This is a top bracket. This is the bottom that sort of receives that rail panel. They ask you to just basically mock this up. So you're gonna line this up where that rail panel comes, mark the 2 holes that get pre-drilled into this post. However, if you look closely here, when I put that where I need to, I have this stair tread in the way, so I can't actually pre-drill these things when they're permanently installed. So I'm gonna have to do all the marking, I think, for these while I just have these temporarily screwed in. Then I'll take all of them down, cut them on the miter saw, pre-drill them on the bench, install these bottom brackets because I'm not going to be able to screw them on when they're installed as well. Then I'll be able to move on to cutting the rail panels themselves to the right lengths once these things are permanently installed. So I'm going to go ahead and get the other 4 of these temporarily set up, get everything marked, labeled so it goes back in the same spot, and go from there. So I went ahead and just did this first rail panel start to finish just to get a grip on what the heck I'm doing here. Cut the top rail, and it's really quite sturdy actually. I'm pretty impressed with this system. It's really nice. While I was at it, I went ahead and just did the permanent anchoring for the lowest 6 posts. That went pretty smoothly. It took a little bit of time to shim them just right to get them all plumbed up. And I only did pre-install the lower brackets where it would be tougher for me to do the pre-drilling. I figured it would be safer to get those installed, mock up the rail panel, and then do the drilling for the upper brackets to get those perfectly placed. The only hiccup that I ran into was the bracket hole spacing here is such that when you center it up, it is just on the edges of this little stiffener inside the aluminum extrusion. So when you pop through with the drill bit here, the drill bit wants to go one way or the other, and I actually broke like a bunch of drill bits until I learned I needed to put the torque setting on the drill like down to the very lowest and be so careful when I came through the wall of this tubing here. If these holes were maybe 1/4 inch spaced apart further, it would work just fine. On the level rails, they are, and I had no problems. You'd go right on each side of this stiffener, but that is literally the toughest part of this whole process, is getting those holes in there, and then the screws don't really want to go in straight either. They want to go at an angle, and of course, because they're a countersunk screw in this bracket, it wants to twist the bracket one way or the other. It's hard to keep the bracket straight. But overall, that was my only hiccup. When it comes to measuring and marking for these rail panels, there is quite a bit of guessing and checking and eyeballing going on. Even the instructions kind of recommend doing that. So I have it sitting on my 5/8 fascia board now, and they're telling you to put a pre-assembled bracket up against the post, then just sort of eyeball where this is supposed to land vertically so that this angled piece hits the bottom edge of this rail panel here. With a mark at that top edge, then I can mark out for the holes and then get this guy fastened on. And at the same time, I'm putting a mark on the side of the rail panel at this face so that I get this cut to the right length as well. Same thing at the bottom with this little bracket, but the difference here is the line needs 3/4 of an inch added to it because it's got to go up inside this little bracket, whereas the top doesn't do that. One of the key things when mocking this up is to make sure that the gaps between the newel and your first baluster are even on both sides of the panel. And it's actually working out really well, just randomly, based on my stairs anyway. I can line this baluster up with the edge of this newel, and somehow the spacing is just right so that the next newel up also is aligned with the baluster. So I have plenty of room to get my bracket in up here because there is some access that I need to have to drill up through here. And I think it looks nice too because it'll have nice even spacing on either side of the newel that's just about the same width as these guys. Bingo. Love it when a plan comes together. So I'm mocking up the last railing panel on the left side here, and originally I was gonna leave these 45-inch posts at 45 inches, but turns out the bracket needs to come to this line here, and this is the 42-inch mark that all the rest of the posts around the deck are cut to. That means I'll be able to run our deck board top plate, that's gonna be our kind of our top rail surface, or cocktail rail as some call it, all the way out over this post here, which would be kind of cool. So we won't have this newel post sticking up through. We'll just do a little mitered return on that. So it'll still look nice on the edge here, and there won't be any newel sticking up. So that was just basically pure happenstance for how far I decided to put the newel back from the stairs. I stayed up past dark last night to get this last rail panel cut and on there perfectly. Bracket comes right to the top of the rail. I forgot it was 42 1/8 from the mounting surface. I almost made the same mistake twice there. Cutting this a little bit too tall and then having me trim it down later like I did with the level rail brackets, but made sure to not do that again, and it's gonna work out all right. So I got all of the brackets on for this last level rail panel. Thank goodness we can finally close in the deck and not worry about falling off the darn thing. This is a pretty good illustration of the screws for the level rail panel versus the stair rail panel. Just that little difference of screw hole placement makes all the difference in how well the screws go in. Little design hiccups like this make me remember my days as a mechanical engineer sitting at the desk, and it is pretty tough to think of little things like this. Even though they seem obvious in the field, they're not always as obvious during the design phase. So goes to show the importance of field testing and actual real life verification. We're finally in the home stretch doing the last stair rail panel here at the top right. I just set this post in permanently, got it lagged down. I had to wait for like 2 weeks to put this post in because I was waiting on a special order part that I forgot to order when we started everything, pretty much due to the fact that I've never installed deck railing before, didn't know I needed it, but it was these little brackets right here that hold the railing to the post. Because technically this little 4-inch gap here is a rail panel. And of course I wasn't going to buy a new rail panel for this because I knew I'd have plenty of scrap to make this out of. But the key is every rail panel comes with their own brackets. So if you don't buy a rail panel, you don't have these brackets. I had a special order these brackets. They came through Lowe's and there was like a 2-week lead time on them. So it just goes to show how one little missing part can really hold a project up. But we finally got the brackets. I got them installed here before installing these posts because they're so close together I can't even get a drill into the side of these. And now we can continue. We are finally at the very last rail panel. This is number 14 total. But these stairs are so much harder than the level panels. So much more attention to detail required. There we go. Oh my gosh. Beautiful. It's a beautiful sight. So the stair railing is all done. Glad to have that closed out. That was the toughest part of the railing thus far. The level rails up top are all mounted, except for one last step, which is these deck board adapter brackets that sit on top of these level rails and allow us to run our deck board all the way across to form a sort of cocktail ledge. You can set whatever drinks or anything else on it, and it just gives you a little bit more of a spot to lean. I like the way it looks as well. So these are just a pretty simple aluminum extrusion that I've cut to fit between our top brackets. Goes on there, sits nice and flush across the posts, the top bracket railing. We just need to secure these on with a bunch of screws and we will be ready to put our deck boards on. These come pre-slotted every foot on the top so that screws come up through the bottom into the deck board and allow that expansion and contraction if needed. And then to secure to the railing, I need to be drilling every foot this way into the side of the railing, and I'll probably do it just to the side of each one of these slots with a little self-tapper screw. It's all the hardware is provided, they're painted black, so it comes out looking really nice and sleek. I really like using the clutch on the drill for these screws into aluminum. Just make sure you don't over tighten it, don't accidentally break any heads off or anything like that. And also that you don't strip the thing because they're painted black and then it'll look silver and not good. All these adapters are now firmly fastened to the top rails, and I've got a scrap of some solid edge decking, which is what we'll be using for our top cap here. And I've made marks on either side where it meets the adapter so I can easily center it at a glance. We're gonna be mitering the corners so when these boards come together, but that's why I have this scrap here so that I can easily place it centered where the eventual railing is gonna be. Now I can measure all the way back to my wall and I can get the full length with the mitered end for this board right here. So I'm just gonna take this slow. I have almost no extras after these top rail boards, so I don't wanna mess up any cuts, that is for sure. For these last few boards, it's gonna be one board at a time. Slow and steady wins the race. Here's the test fit of this first side, and I'm really liking how this is gonna look when it's all said and done. It's gonna be wonderful to have someplace to set a drink. Probably not on this side because the stairs are right below. Good way to drop something on the stairs, but everywhere else, it's just really comfortable holding this ledge, be able to look out over the nice view. Love it. But it's fitting together quite well. I'm putting pocket holes in one side on every joint. And one thing to note about these actually while I'm at it, I actually set the pocket hole bit a little bit deeper so it goes all the way through the wood. That way these screws can free spin in this wood and that way it'll cinch it tight. If they can't free spin, the threads get bound up in this piece of wood too, and it has a really hard time actually pulling the joint tight. This is my experimental mitered return as well that I'm doing for these guys. Rather than just showing the ugly, black cut end here, I did a little bevel and just took another piece of scrap and beveled the opposite way. I think it looks a lot better than just the standard basic end cut. Looking at it from distance, it just looks like one, grain matched board wrapping around there. To get the pocket screws fastened in these miter joints, I'm just gonna keep a clamp at each end and just barely lift these boards up, just enough to get the bit underneath the board and into that pocket hole and just kind of fasten them in place. I don't really want to have to deal with these two 12-foot long boards anywhere else than where they're supposed to be. Look, I'm in a wind tunnel up here. She's a beaut. Rinse and repeat for the other side. The very last step for this railing topper is to secure this to the black metal bracket up from underneath with these Phillips coarse head screws. They're sized so that they don't come up through the deck board, but they bite in really well. I've done a couple test ones already. We just gotta make sure these boards stay straight. This one's got a pretty good crown to it. So I'm gonna start at one end, secure it, and then work my way back with the clamp, making sure that it's still centered over my railing.
With these last few screws, that is a wrap on deck railing. This was not a small amount of work, but we are so happy with how it looks. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the series finale of our DIY deck build where we're diving into picture frames, stair treads, and fascia. As always, thanks for watching and we'll see you on the next one.